The ballroom glittered with chandeliers, every table dressed in silk and crystal, while I stood with a tray of champagne glasses balanced in my hands. My cousin's voice cut through the music, loud enough for the entire hall to hear, calling out that I had finally found my true career. Laughter erupted from a corner, followed by another remark about how a dropout like me was lucky to be trusted with glassware. Their words struck sharper than the clinking of silver and china, but I did not flinch. I kept my back straight, my face cold, and my hands steady, because showing pain in that moment would have given them exactly what they wanted. I could feel dozens of eyes on me, some amused, some pitying, none willing to defend me. The humiliation spread like fire across the room, feeding on whispers, turning me into the night's entertainment. I stood there as if on trial, accused of wasting my life, accused of inventing a husband, accused of being less than everyone else at the table. Inside, anger surged, but I locked it away. This was no longer a family celebration. It was an open battlefield, and they had chosen me as their target. In my family, every gathering felt less like a celebration and more like a courtroom. The currency was never affection or loyalty, but degrees, promotions, and salaries. You could measure your worth by how quickly an aunt bragged about your title or how loudly an uncle announced your bonus. If you had an advanced degree, you were a rising star. If you had a six-figure job, you were a golden child. By those standards, I was already sentenced. I had left college after 2 years and drifted into service jobs that kept me afloat, but never impressed anyone. To them, I was proof of wasted potential, a warning sign for cousins not to follow. My worth in their eyes was the $15 an hour I made carrying trays instead of the person I had become. They compared me with precision, as if reciting statistics. David, the engineer, is clearing $100,000 a year. Stephanie, the lawyer, is bringing in $200,000 now that she has made partner. Jennifer with her marketing degree and her corner office. Against those numbers, my paycheck of $25,000 to $30,000 a year placed me near the bottom of their unspoken ranking. It was not just money, it was a judgment written in figures. The irony is that most families in America think the same way. Studies show more than 60% of middle-class parents believe a college degree defines success. Income charts become moral codes, dictating who is celebrated and who is forgotten. My relatives followed that script faithfully, clapping louder for the ones who fit the mold while letting silence fall on the ones who did not. Sitting at the table with them, I often felt like a defendant without counsel. Every smile carried a reminder that I had not measured up, that my life choices had stripped me of value. They did not need to say it directly. The weight was there in every comparison, pressing down like a verdict already decided before I ever walked in the room. The reception glowed with excess. Crystal chandeliers spilled light across the ballroom, and silk linens draped over every table. A 7-piece orchestra played near a wall of orchids. This was no ordinary wedding. The bill for the night would have run above $80,000, a figure that spoke louder than any toast. Guests marveled at the display, while I carried trays that seemed heavier with each step. The whispers began almost immediately. Someone commented that at least I had found steady work. Another voice chimed in that no degree was required to refill a champagne. A cousin laughed that it suited me better than college ever did. Each remark carried enough bite to sting, but was spoken as if it were a casual truth. They did not hide it. They wanted me to hear. Then came the topic of my marriage. One cousin leaned in and told the others that I still claimed to be married to a man no one had seen. Another cousin responded with a laugh that I must be ashamed to introduce him, if he even existed. By the time the words spread across the table, the idea that I was inventing a husband had turned into entertainment for the night. Faces turned, waiting for me to react, waiting for me to confess a lie I had never told. I held my posture, eyes fixed on the floor, letting the sound wash over me. My silence gave them more reason to smirk. They had found a target, and every word deepened the cut. What wounded most was not the insult itself, but the way the family joined in together, united in turning me into a spectacle. Dinner only sharpened the humiliation. I discovered my seat was not among the family tables near the bride and groom. Instead, a folded card with my name was placed in the corner with the catering staff. When I asked, my mother explained that since I was technically working, it made sense to sit with them. That was the moment I realized I was not considered a daughter or cousin tonight. I was part of the hired help. I sat with strangers who were kinder than my own blood, eating rubber chicken while listening to laughter that came from the tables where I should have belonged. It was not the meal that hurt, but the message. I had been erased from my place in the family, left in the shadows of a party where my worth was decided for me. The clinking of silver stopped when my Uncle Robert rose with his wineglass raised high. His voice carried easily across the ballroom, practiced and proud. He announced that tonight was not only a wedding, but a celebration of family success. He called on Jennifer first, praising her MBA and her marketing position with a salary that secured her a corner office. Applause filled the room. Next came Stephanie, who had just made partner at her law firm, her yearly income now above $200,000. More applause. Then David, the engineer, earns close to $100,000 a year. Each name was like a medal pinned to their chest, each figure another reminder of how achievement was measured. I waited, my stomach tightening as if bracing for impact. The list went on, cousin after cousin, each one recognized for degrees and salaries. My name never came. He set his glass down with a smile, satisfied that every success story had been honored. I remained invisible, the omission louder than any insult. $15 an hour, that was my number. It was not spoken, but it hung in the air like a sentence delivered in silence. By skipping me, Robert had made it clear. In the family's hierarchy, I was not worth mentioning. The applause that rang around the room sealed the verdict. In that moment, it was not just disappointment I felt, but the sharp certainty that I had been erased from their story of pride. My phone buzzed against the side of my apron. The message was short, a single line about a contract worth $500 million that had just closed in Singapore. He would be arriving soon. I read the words twice, letting them steady me while the laughter around me carried on. The hotel manager approached again, bowing slightly as he addressed me as Mrs. Montgomery. His voice was respectful, his expression careful, yet my family caught the words and burst out laughing. To them, it was a comedy. They whispered that I must have begged the staff to play along, that my fantasy had finally reached new levels of desperation. Inside, I felt the tension coil tighter. The truth was close, but it was still mine alone. Each time the manager returned to ask if I needed anything, I saw smirks spread across the table. They thought they were watching me unravel, mistaking the calm in my face for a mask ready to crack. The weight of the night shifted, though they did not notice. I carried their insults like stones, silent but steady, knowing that a single moment was drawing near. For the first time, it was not humiliation that filled me. It was anticipation. The sound of engines outside the ballroom drew no attention at first. 3 black SUVs rolled to a stop, and a team of security stepped through the doors with quiet precision. Conversations faltered, the laughter that had carried all evening now thinning into silence. I set my tray down, untying the apron from my waist, my heart steady for the first time all night. He entered without hesitation. Alexander Montgomery, tall and calm, dressed in a navy suit that fit with understated power. His eyes searched until they found mine, and when he smiled, it was as if the entire room shifted around us. He crossed the floor, ignoring the stares and whispers, and wrapped me in his arms. There was no performance, no announcement, only the simple weight of his presence as he held me. The family's silence turned heavy. They had mocked me for hours, but in that instant, every insult lost its echo. Alexander was not a rumor. He was the man who had just returned from closing a $500 million deal overseas, the man who led a firm managing over $10 billion in assets. His reputation did not need to be explained. The respect he carried entered the room before his name was spoken. He greeted the hotel manager by name and asked that the night's bill be covered as a gift. The staff bowed quickly, confirming what my family had dismissed as fantasy. Eyes darted from him to me, confusion cracking into shame. For the first time, it was not wealth they saw. It was truth standing before them, undeniable, unshaken. I felt the eyes of my cousins on me, searching for the girl they had ridiculed. But she was gone. What remained was a woman whose dignity had been restored not by riches, but by the fact that she had never needed to lie. His presence was enough to silence a room that had turned me into a spectacle. And in that silence, I finally breathed. The shift was immediate. The same relatives who had laughed at me now rushed forward with smiles too wide, voices too sweet, each one eager to introduce themselves to Alexander. They asked about his work, his travels, his company, as if the last few hours of mockery had never happened. Their eyes sparkled, but it was not affection, it was a calculation. I stood beside him, watching their performance unfold. Apologies were slipped into conversations, thin and hollow, designed to cover their shame while still reaching for an advantage. Some wanted business cards, others offered invitations to dinners they had once excluded me from. It was clear their respect was not for me, not even for us as a couple. It was for the wealth they now understood he carried. The strange part was that I felt no triumph. The revenge they imagined I must be savoring was absent. Instead, there was only emptiness, the realization that their sudden admiration had nothing to do with love or loyalty. For years, I had wanted their approval. Now it was handed to me, but it was poisoned, stripped of meaning. What they respected was not the truth of who I was. It was the money they wished they could touch. For most of my life, I believed that if I could earn their approval, I would finally feel complete. I tried to measure myself against their degrees, their careers, their salaries, thinking that one day I would reach a point where they could no longer dismiss me. That night proved how empty that pursuit had been. The applause they gave each other was never about truth. It was about the image. Standing in that ballroom, I understood that my worth was never supposed to be weighed on their scales. Dignity does not come from the nod of an uncle or the forced smile of a cousin. It comes from living in a way that does not betray who you are, even when the world insists you are less. That realization settled deeper than any praise could ever reach. I thought about people outside that room. The worker is mocked because his paycheck is small. The entrepreneur who is ridiculed for failing once before succeeding. The soldier returns home to find his sacrifices invisible. The official who refuses to cut corners and is punished for it. Each one knows the sting of being measured by the wrong standard, and each one has the chance to claim a different kind of victory. My family's opinion no longer defined me. Their silence, their laughter, their sudden reversal, none of it held power anymore. What mattered was the discipline to stand firm when mocked, the loyalty to truth when lies would be easier, the courage to walk forward without needing permission to exist. That was freedom. That was an honor. And in that moment, I no longer needed their recognition. I had already won. Looking back, I realized that night was never about proving my family wrong. It was about proving to myself that I no longer needed their judgment to define me. The moment Alexander walked in, he only revealed what had been true all along. My dignity had not been lost. It had only been hidden under the weight of their scorn, waiting for me to see it clearly. What happened was not just a wealthy man arriving to silence a crowd. It was a reminder that honor is not given by others. It is built brick by brick through integrity, patience, and the courage to stand when others try to make you small. Money may open doors, but it cannot buy the quiet strength that comes from knowing who you are. That is the kind of wealth no one can take. So if you have ever been underestimated, if you have ever been told you were less, I want you to know that their words do not decide your story. Your choices do. Your discipline and your truth will outlast their laughter. I invite you to share your own story of facing doubt and finding your strength. Leave it in the comments because your voice matters. And if you believe that real dignity cannot be bought or stolen, subscribe and join me here. Let your success, your resilience, and your honor speak louder than any insult ever could.